Now I will invite my colleague and chairman of All Party Parliamentary Group, Dave Anderson, who has travelled all the way from Gateshead, Berkeley, to be with us this evening. Dave Anderson.
Thank you, Mushtaq. Good evening, everyone. Hello, say hello.
Good evening.
You're here to enjoy yourselves, but I'm going to bore you for 10 minutes first. As Mushtaq said, my background is in the trade union movement, and I've spent a lot of my life being involved in conflict and conflict resolution. In many ways, that is why I was pleased when I was approached by Mushtaq to become involved with this group, because the motto of this group is we want to build a world based on justice, peace and democracy through dialogue. And we believe that our role is to open the House of Commons up to anyone from anywhere in the world, as Mushtaq said, people without a voice to have a voice in what is the mother of parliaments. And we've had tremendous success over the last 5 years, and we've had people from virtually every corner of the earth, and going forward we'll have people in the next month from Ethiopia, from Colombia, we've had people from Cuba, all around the Middle East and beyond. You don't need me to tell you that we live in very, very dangerous times. Clearly, at the beginning of this year, nobody would have believed that there would have been regime change in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya. But even though that's happened, there's huge concerns about what's left, what's behind, what's coming next. And even more concern for me is the ratcheting up of the scenario around Iran. Clearly, what happened in the last week, the problems around the embassy in Tehran, but also the problems of us reacting and throwing the ambassador out, is a problem. But an even bigger problem is happening across the Atlantic, where Newt Gingrich has said quite clearly, if he becomes the president of the USA in 1 year's time, he's prepared to bomb Iran. And sadly, President Obama, who most of us put great faith in, as far as I'm aware, hasn't said a word, which is not why those of us in this country and in his country had so much hope in that man. And it's sad that he is not given the lead that the world needs at this moment in time. I'm convinced that if Newt Gingrich does become the president, or if Obama is still the president, and either the US or the Israelis decide to take military action against Iran, that our government today will support them. I would like to think that if my party was in power, that wouldn't have happened, if only for the fact that the Labour Party still bears the scars, quite rightly, of the huge mistake we made by invading Iraq, following another right-wing rabid US president into a scenario that we should have kept well clear of. We should have said to him, you're wrong. We should be saying that to the Americans today, because the truth is that we know wins in Iran. I was in Israel 5 years ago, and I sat with some of the generals, and they said then we could wipe Iran off the face of the earth in 1 day. The only thing that was stopping them was the Americans. If the Americans say okay, then it will happen. That won't be the end of it, that will be the start of it. And not only will we see a nuclear holocaust, we'll see huge problems in terms of the economy of the world, in terms of the stability of the world, and it will be opening a box that may never ever be closed. It really is a major, major issue. And I worry that the government we've got today, and I'm biased, I might as well tell people tonight, I am completely and utterly anti-conservative. That's the way I was brought up. But I really worry on a non-political view about where this government would go. They don't have the depth, they don't have the strength, they don't have the maturity not to do anything other than follow the US. And if the US makes a huge mistake, supported by the Israelis, then I really do worry. But on the back of that, even if they don't do that, we have the long-running sword of Palestine. As Mushtaq said, we had a meeting this week in the House of Commons discussing Palestine. And the truth is, as long as the tension between Iran and Israel is heightened, nothing will happen to resolve the issue of the Palestinian people. And you know better than me until that is resolved, we'll never ever have stability in the Middle East, in any part of the Middle East, without that happening. So it really, really is hard times. And for me, the one thing we've all got to argue for, and my government must argue, and the Americans, the one thing we have to have is support the Palestinian people's claim for statehood. It's a disgrace that the United Nations don't recognise Palestine. It's a disgrace that the powers that be have stopped, have removed funding for education work through UNESCO from the Palestinian people because they've had the nerve, the cheek, the temerity to say, recognise us as a state. Every country in the world, apart, well, even Israel, all say we want a two-state solution. But when one of those states says, please can we be a state, they all say, no, not yet. Let's wait a little bit longer. They've been waiting since 1948 and it's far too long. It needs to be put to an end. I'm hopeful to be going, that if things work out well, to in either January or March, to visit Gaza, a beleaguered place that I cannot see any improvements unless we have some movement over the next period about what's happening in Iran. Further afield, we have the problems, and you know as better than me again, ladies and gentlemen, about the issue in Pakistan. One of the biggest secrets on this earth that never gets talked about in the West is how many ordinary men and women in Pakistan have died because Pakistan supported the moves by George Bush to go into Iraq. At the last count, more than 35,000 innocent men and women have died in Pakistan as a direct result of the mistake that the West made. But we've been here before. We were here in the 1980s and 1990s when the world turned a blind eye to what Saddam Hussein was doing in Iraq because he was controlling and hindering the progress of the Iranians under the Ayatollah. The world turned its back when 182,000 Kurds were massacred, when 4,500 villages were razed to the ground, when people were being gassed, when people were being buried alive by his soldiers in a wave of ethnic cleansing. We stood back and pretended it wasn't happening because we were quite happy. We were quite happy that those people were like pieces on a chessboard. Well, it's wrong. We have to stand up and say it's wrong. We should never ever forget that. We move into a situation in May when there's going to be discussions in Chicago which is hopefully going to shape the way forward for Afghanistan. I hope to God that those talks are positive, but I really do worry because May of next year we'll be right in the middle of the US elections, and the US elections will take precedence over everything else. And I'm convinced that if international stuff becomes part of the issues in those discussions, people will forget about what they're trying to do in Afghanistan. And I think the American people will say, we want to be out of Afghanistan, we don't care what it's like when you leave it, get out of there and come back home. Well, that's resolved properly, and we make sure the Afghan people are able to look after themselves, take care of themselves, and build a new world together. And that might well include having the Taliban working with them. If that's what it takes, so be it. But if we come out in a hurry, then I really do worry the world will be a very, very unsafe place to live. And then, on top of everything what's going on in that international sense, we see what's happening in the economic sense. We all know the problems in this country around the austerity measures. In Europe, it looks like they've lost control totally of where we're going. And in the US, we've got a scenario whereby you've got so many people just jockeying for a position that the American economic system is almost ground to a halt. And this is an assault not just on the economy of these countries, but it's also an assault on democracy. I don't know how good the great Prime Minister was. I certainly was never a fan of Silvio Berlusconi. But the truth is, the people of Greece and the people of Italy voted for those Prime Ministers. They didn't vote for some bureaucrat from Brussels to be installed on the whim of the capitalist markets to say to their people, you are now going to suffer, you're going to be forced to put right the mistakes that we've made. But we really need to be clear that this is a world that is out of kilter. And this to me isn't just a question of economics, it's a question of morality. Because it's wrong, it's immoral that working people, poor people, disabled people, children, women across the world are paying for the mistakes of the market. They're paying for people who got this country, got the world into an economic mess. And now, as we try to get out of that mess, they come back and say, we want even more of you. Somebody once said to me, what you have is a scenario where someone's burnt your house down. And they come back next week and say, if you give me £100,000, I'll rebuild it for you. That's exactly what's happening to men and women across this world because of the failure of the economic systems. We really, really do need to build a world based on what is best for the people. That's why we're involved in the work we do. That's why we'll continue to work with people from around the world. Like my comrade Taj, let's say from Kashmir. We really do need to start talking to people about places like Kashmir, about places like Colombia, and about places like Cuba. For years, I've spent lots of my life in America. I've got some great friends in America. But I've never ever understood why they took the attitude they have to the Cubans. If they embraced the Cubans, they would have given up on the revolution years ago. They've actually blockaded them. They made the Cubans hate them instead of saying, look, let's try and build an adult working relationship. But they've decided that's not the way to go. And ordinary American people would not be happy with the way in which their government has treated the Cuban people. So we have lots of reasons to be pessimistic. But I wouldn't be standing here tonight if I was a pessimist. Mushtaq wouldn't be involved in things he's involved in, because from where we come from, you've got nothing other than your optimism to take you forward. And we also have the words of Edmund Burke, that for evil to succeed, all it takes is for good men and good men of goodwill to do nothing. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, the people who brought this banner together, either in Parliament or outside, will never ever do anything other than stand up and challenge evil wherever it exists. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.